So now we've got a march on a highway. And we're seeing more and more and more of these. And they're not going to stop. If anything, we're going to see more of them. And we're going to see more conflicts. And we're going to see more bloodshed and injury and death and upset come from people choosing to block roads and highways. And I haven't seen anybody give a really clear explanation of the ethics of blocking a road or a highway. And I think it's time that somebody did that. Now, as we talk about this story in Colorado, as well as the next one that happened in Austin recently, I'm going to say if a lot, because as always happens, new details emerge, new facts emerge, and when I am discussing the ethics of a situation, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm using the situation as a learning experiment, a learning exercise. I'm going to test libertarian ethics on situations that come, just like I did a while back with the guy that trespassed on the house that was under construction and then got chased down and was shot or whatever. When I made that last video, I said a lot of ifs again, because again, I don't have a dog in the fight. My only goal here is to refine libertarian ethics and our understanding of things like the non-aggression principle through using these real world scenarios that pop up. So if I make a judgment and I evaluate the equation based on a set of facts, and those facts end up being wrong, don't at me like I've got some dog in the fight. If the facts change, then my evaluation might change as well. I do see a lot of people missing a lot of the fundamental points. So I wanted to address them. And the same thing happened back, I forgot the guy's name, the guy that trespassed and then got chased down and shot when he tried to grab the dude's gun or whatever. But anyway, there's a lot of people that argued back and forth, and 50%, 60% of the people arguing do not have the most up-to-date facts, and so it's just a constant dumpster fire of people trying to correct each other and people trying to one-up each other with the latest details, and then it oftentimes will come down to people looking at video and analyzing video frame by frame and making judgments on what little dust scratches, shadows, and flashes they see in the little frames of video that they pull apart. I'm not terribly interested in that in this situation. I'm interested in testing libertarian ethics. And so that's enough preface. Just wanted to set the stage properly as we enter these discussions. If somebody in the comments disagrees, maybe put disagree in all caps at the beginning of your comment, followed by maybe the point that you disagree about, and we can discuss it. And then if we feel like we have enough intractable disagreement, then you want to dial in on Skype, we can set that up. And it might make for a cool talk. So we're here to have a good time exploring libertarian ethics. If you're going to take this personally, this is probably not your stream. I'm not taking it personally. Don't have a dog in the fight. Just want to talk about the philosophy and the ethics. I already said this, but I'll say it again. Talk about the philosophy and ethics from the perspective of somebody that has participated and helped lead marches in streets with guns. So let's do that. Okay, let's start with Colorado. This was a Jeep. This was a bunch of people blocking an interstate freeway that is a feeder to an airport, which bears mentioning. People trying to get to their flights on time. They were blocking the highway. A Jeep drove through, I guess, the people, did not hit anyone. Apparently, a truck swerved in front of him to block him from proceeding. He collided with the truck and then rolled through and I guess on past the protesters. So this is the first video. So the gunshots that you heard were one of the protester participants shooting at the Jeep as it rolled by. And I think damaged the Jeep with a round and then shot 2 other participants behind the Jeep. So just really, really, really reckless use of a firearm. Really tragic. All of the stuff that we're going to talk about is tragic. I'm not happy about any of the victims or any of the people that got harmed in any of these scenarios, but in this case, it was tragic and dumb. The guy didn't hit the driver of the Jeep, if even that would have been an ethical thing to do, which I hold that it was not. And that will kind of set the stage for the rest of this discussion. But he didn't even hit what he was aiming at, and he wounded 2 of his own activists. Okay. Here's another view that I hadn't seen many people publishing around.
Let's talk about the Jeep that drove through the Aurora protests on the 25th.
This guy's commentary is completely biased and wrong. Let's see here. Okay, so
Feet behind the wall of mob.
That was the truck that he collided with that swerved to block him, and then he rolled on through the rest of the protest. The people had enough time. That was the people before, like just completely stopping both directions of travel. And by the time the Jeep got there, the people had moved enough out of the road that you saw in the other video. Yeah, you can see here. Just sort of rolling through. There's stuff being thrown in front of the vehicle. Didn't hit anybody. Rolled on through. Got shot at. Continued driving, I think, on a flat tire. So let's do a primer on the ethics of roads before we get into the next one, which I have a feeling might be the contentious one. And I enjoy the contention because we might learn something. If somebody disagrees, I might learn something. Not necessarily about the facts of the case, as I'm pretty sure I'm caught up on those and I know sort of what happened. But, you know, I could be wrong in my ethical evaluation, and I'm totally happy to find out that that's the case. So let's begin by talking about the roads. My roads. We are in a situation right now of... there is a crap load of property that most people call government property. What are the ethics surrounding property called government property? This goes, you can check the Disenthrall channel for the specifics of how this works, but here's the TLDR. The government rightfully owns jack and shit. And there's a video on our channel. What's the video called? It's called Why is Property, is the name of the video. And then I think there's a follow-up to that called something Jordan story. Maybe somebody can link them in the comments if they can find them. But there's 2 sort of property videos. They're cartoon animated or whatever. The second one makes the point about the government rightfully owns jack and shit. Why? Because the foundation of all property systems, not just the sort of anarcho-capitalistic one, is that property does not transfer. Property title, property ownership does not transfer when force or fraud or coercion is involved. What this means is that if you steal something from somebody, you cannot be the owner of that thing. If you threaten somebody into giving you something, you cannot become the owner of the thing they give you. If you trick somebody by lying to them, or by breaking a contract to acquire a piece of property from somebody, you do not actually get the rightful highest claim to that property. That's just a more wordy way of saying you do not become the owner of that thing that you lied or coerced or tricked or defrauded or, you know, broke a contract to acquire. You cannot even, and this is the one that not everybody's heard of, but I cover in those videos that I made, me and Kason made a couple years ago. They're pretty funny. But you cannot even homestead unowned property using stolen or coerced or violent resources. What I mean by that is, I cannot go and steal $1 million from you that I then use to build a house on unowned land and say that I have rightful ownership of that land or that house. Because coercion or force, or in this case theft, was used in the homesteading of that unowned property. Property does not transfer when coercion or theft or fraud or force was involved. Every piece of property the government owns, and look, I'm open to being wrong if somebody can think of an exception. I have not yet thought of one. Every single piece of property the government owns, possesses, I should probably say, was acquired through theft, through fraud, through coercion, through threat, through homesteading with stolen or improperly owned resources. The government rightfully owns jack and shit. That leaves the roads and all public property as in this messy tragedy of the commons, unowned or at least improperly owned place. Now, what I mean by that is, like, a lot of the roads were built on land acquired through eminent domain. That's just theft. That doesn't mean that the government owns it. It doesn't mean that the public owns it. It doesn't mean that it's unowned. It means that it's stolen and somebody else still owns it. Because when the government steals something, it's not like the original owner's claim to that property is lost. No, if the government steals $1,000 from you and then spends it on 50 things around the world, it doesn't mean that your property is just lost and you no longer own it. No, you still own that money or those resources that were stolen from you. And the people that had their land stolen through eminent domain still absolutely have the highest claim to that land. Just because there's concrete on top of it now makes no difference. So I would say a large the portion of the land that was unowned when the government came along to build a road on it is still rightfully unowned, or you might say could be said to be owned by people that would have built there otherwise, but that gets really messy and hard to delineate. Or it's owned by people the government defrauded or coerced or threatened to acquire it for their road. And that's, eminent domain in a nutshell, right? They say, we're taking our land, you're going to accept this amount, and if you resist, we'll cage you or shoot you. That highway land was either unowned or rightfully owned by someone else that was dispossessed of it and, wasn't there or wasn't capable of sort of enforcing their ownership of it. And, wasn't able to set rules for it, which should have been the case had that been the case. So for the purpose of this discussion, the best way to treat sort of public roads and all public property is basically unowned or improperly possessed property. When you have a larger group of people, let's say, surround somebody, you are blocking their ability to go where they intended to go on property that you do not have rightful control over. And that's where we get into these protests and things like this on people blocking roads. There's a lot more variables at play here. So if we're just talking about pedestrians, people walking, it's easy to imagine a group of people surrounding somebody else, or standing shoulder to shoulder and blocking a walkway on property that they don't own. Again, they have no rightful ownership claim. They have no right to control this property or access to it or travel across it. They don't have that right. It's not theirs. This is unowned property. And if anything, and I'll summon Walter Block's, one of Walter Block's awesome arguments for this point, when he was talking about resolving things like, an example that he used were airways. So it's generally recognized that the skyways, the sky itself, is sort of communal property, which is an unlibertarian way of thinking about it. It's unowned. And yet, there are very real, very specific, narrow lanes of air travel. And if I started going to flight school, I'm way into planes. I've got, probably 1,200 hours in flight simulators learning how to actually pilot. And there are very specific lanes in the sky at altitudes and GPS coordinates where planes fly every day, all day, back and forth, very much like roads. And even though the land that they, or the air that they fly through is unowned, it's sort of like these airlines homestead these lanes because they make use of them every day. I mean, that's kind of what homesteading is, right? I mean, they're not going out of their way to explicitly take ownership of it, but in a way, they're using that literally every day as a matter of course. They have developed some level of right to continue doing so because they got there first and they're using it and blah, blah, blah. Just like, if you got to a piece of land that was previously unused and you made first use of it, well, now you have the highest claim to continue using it. And so if somebody then was a latecomer or a second comer, moved into that area and started interfering with your original use of it, they would be seen as the aggressor, the one with the lower claim to that area. Same thing, and I made this case recently on our Matrix server. If I hopped in my hot air balloon and floated my ass up and positioned myself squarely in the middle of one of these sky highways, and I don't call them that hyperbolically, I mean, it's so well worn of a path through the air at a specific altitude and whatever that you can really think of it like that. If a plane were to fly into my hot air balloon, it would be pretty clear to everybody involved with any travel of the highway who was the problem in that situation. It was me blocking a very commonly used path by a series of planes. So even in a state of sort of non-rigidly enforced claim of ownership over a piece of unowned property, like a piece of sky, which is even less defined than a piece of road, we can sort of establish like who has the right of way, so to speak, in that area. And so even if we recognize that the roads are unowned or improperly owned land, people sort of micro homestead that road constantly every day by driving to and from it, especially maybe not so much the smaller roads, the whatever, especially dirt roads, things like that. This probably doesn't apply to them, but when you have major interstate highways that feed international airports, things like that, or, in downtown areas like we're going to talk about next. I mean, these are areas of property that people conduct commerce on, they travel on every day. There's an expectation that because they sort of were there first, they would be able to continue doing that. I guess, maybe we'll have Walter Block on to talk about this, but and walk us through that argument again, but you can go look up videos from him on that. So even without claims to, this is the law, I think that the law in Texas makes this abundantly clear. I can discuss it if you want. Let me know in chat if you want me to tell you about Texas law and this stuff. It might be important for at least interpreting like a statist view of the situation. I'm pretty familiar with the gun laws in Texas and the laws of deadly force in Texas, and it's pretty clear. Those arguments are less interesting to me because statist law is fucked up anyway, and it's biased and unequally applied and prosecuted, right? So it's sort of like arguing about spellcasting and magic spells that don't exist. So another part of the ethics of the situation is that if you don't own the property, you don't have some kind of sort of built-in right to control what people do on it. So everyone's rights in that situation is sort of equal. And so one person doesn't have a right to exert any more control over another person as that person has a right to control the other person back. So if somebody's wanting to walk in a direction across a piece of land, negative rights and a basic libertarian understanding of interaction says that you cannot block that person's travel. Now this gets into, what people would call gray areas around easements, and can they just, step to the side and walk around, things like that. But that's all pretty clear, I think, to most people. Another thing that adds to that would be the existence of sidewalks. Sidewalks are basically roads for humans, and roads are for cars. It's like you have the car road and you have the human road, and when the humans move off the human road onto the car road, you are creating conflict purposefully. That's another kind of important element to think about here. It would be like if you had a group of people that blocked your ability to walk down a sidewalk, that would be a NAP violation. There is no real question there. And if anybody disagrees with me there, again, put disagree in the comments and tell me why you think you would have the right to block my ability to walk down a sidewalk that you don't own. That's pretty clear. And so you could equally say, not even equally, you could more easily say that a pedestrian certainly does not have the right to block vehicles on the thing that the vehicles usually travel on. Another thing is a disparity of threats. So I heard an absurd claim from a couple people that, well, let's go ahead and move on to this next one. I don't want to talk around it anymore. Oh, last thing I'll mention, for those that may or may not be so inclined, the Jeep owner is, apparently he was, in fact, trying to fly home. They were trying to get to the airport. So they weren't there to run people over and murder people like so many people are saying on Twitter. Like, that is an outright lie. That is a disgusting, dangerous lie. But they had a flight that they were trying to catch to get home, which adds another element to this. Like, what right does any person have, any of the people on that road have, to prevent them from getting to the airport? They had paid money for a ticket. That is how people get to and from the airport. That's how people have done it every day, thousands of times a day. No one has the right to block peaceful travel to get to and from that airport. How many of those people would have bought him a plane ticket? If he pulled up and said, hey, I got to get to the airport, whatever. Do you think those people would have gotten out of the way so he could have driven by if he'd stopped and been like, hey, I got to get to the airport. Can you get out of the way? No, this goes to the thing. The whole reason they were on the freaking highway was to be disruptive. If they didn't want to be disruptive, they would have stood somewhere else.